सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवत प्रभो कलिध्वान्तोदितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तित परमानंद पाठाय प्रेमवर्षक्षराय ते सर्वदा सर्वसेव्या श्रीकृष्णाय नमोस्तुमे मदेक बंधो मत संगीन मत गुरो मन महाधन मन निस्तारक मत भाग्य मत आनंद नमोस्तुते असाधु साधुतादाय नतनी चोच्चताकर आनम जगदाचिन मां प्रेमा उत्कंठयोस्पुरा ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओके 25 तद्विश्वनाभिं त्वतिवर्ति विष्णोर् अणीयसा वीरजैनात्मनैकः नमस्कृतं ब्रह्म विदामुपैति कल्पायुषो यद्विबुधा रमन्ते. This Shishumara is the pivot for the turning of the complete universe, and it is called the navel of Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. The yogi alone goes beyond the circle of Shishumara and attains the planet Maharloka, where purified saints like Bhrigu enjoy a duration of life of, what is this, 1,000, million, billion, 4 billion, 320 million solar years. This planet is worshipable even for the saints who are transcendently situated. Brahma Purana. Something is wrong with this. Why is it Brahma like this? Just a minute. I have a physical copy of Madhvacharya's commentary. I'll just make it. I think it's it. Point to 125. It is Sandhu. Yodhyaya. It's not there. At least one version it is not there. Vaishvanaram Yati Vishaya Sagata. Is it the one? No, okay. It comes as text 28 here. Abrahmano. 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 Okay. Manvantarayushah Swargya. Those who reside in Swarga, they live for a Manvantara. Maharloketu Kalpika. Those who live in Maharloka live for a Kalpa. Abrahmano Janadhyastu Maharlokepi Evara. And those who live from Janaloka up to Brahmaloka, they live longer than how much they live in Maharloka. I've seen elsewhere. Where did I see? I saw in the Vyasa Bhashya to a portion of the Yoga Sutra. There's a description of the longevity. When we come to fifth canto, we'll look into all that. Vishwasya Nabhim Suryadi Ashriya Bhutam. It is called the navel because it is the shelter of the sun and other heavenly bodies. Paratah Swarginam Gatya Bhava Eka eva Nirmalena Linga Sharirena Brahma Vidam Sthanam Anyai Namaskritam Maharlokam with a pure subtle body, because the residents of Swarga have no access further than Swarga. Knowers of Brahman, they attain Maharloka, which is offered obeisances by others, those who are not knowers of Brahman. Yet yasmin vibudha mahakalpayushah vidvalaya. They live for a kalpa and so on. Aniyasa, animadi siddhimatvat ati sukshmena. They move through because they have very fine bodies, subtle bodies. And they also utilize anima and the other siddhis. Because they possess these potencies, therefore they're able to go to Maharloka. 26. अथो अनन्तस्य मुखानलेन दन्तह्यमानं सन्निरीक्ष्य विश्वं निर्याति सिद्धेश्वर जुष्टधिष्ण्यं यद्वै परार्ध्यं तदुपारमेष्ठ्यम्. At the time of the final devastation of the complete universe, the end of the duration of Brahma's life, a flame of fire emanates from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe. The yogi sees all the planets of the universe burning to ashes, and thus he leaves for Satyaloka by airplanes used by the great purified souls. The duration of life in Satyaloka is calculated to be, now what is this? 1,000, million, billion, trillion, 311 trillion, 40 billion years. Atho Anantaram Kalpante, at the end of the Kalpa, so Vishwam, the final devastation of the complete universe. The complete universe here refers to the three worlds, Trailokya, not the portion above that. Maharloka also experiences some heat. Therefore, they move up through Vimanas. Iti Shrashtyam Suchitam. So, it is understood that Satyaloka is the topmost abode. Atho Lila Vihita Sharirena Tad Bhoganantara. Deva Goswami says, Atho, thereupon, indicates that after these souls have sufficiently enjoyed themselves through their bodies, now those bodies are themselves subtle, which they have assumed as a sport, so they are able to expand themselves, it appears. Yadi kalpaparyantam kautakavashat tatraiva satam ichchati tata kalpante sati. If, just out of curiosity, that person desires to stay in Maharloka till the end of a kalpa, then at the end of a kalpa, then he moves up. Niryati, he goes up. He leaves, departs from Maharloka. Ushni Bhutat Maharlokat Urdhvam goes to Satyaloka, which is Dvaiparartha Paryanta Sthai, which exists up to two Pararthas. Parartha is actually half of Brahma's life. That is a unit. Two Pararthas means it exists for a complete life of Brahma. So Satyaloka is higher than Maharloka. So when Maharloka becomes hot, then they move out. Siddheshwarai Jushtani Dishniyani Vimanani Yasmim Stat. So they use airplanes, which are used by the lords of the Siddhas. Siddha is a species. It is indicated herein that the residents of Maharloka, where the purified living entities or demigods possess a duration of life calculated to be 1,000 million billion, 4 billion, 320 million solar years, have airships by which they reach Satyaloka, the topmost planet of the universe. In other words, the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us many clues about other planets far, far away from us, which modern planes and spacecraft cannot reach even by imaginary speeds. The statements of Srimad Bhagavatam are accepted by great acharyas like Sridhar Swami, Ramanujacharya, and Vallabhacharya. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically accepts Srimad Bhagavatam as spotless Vedic authority, and as such, no sane man can ignore the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam when it is spoken by the self-realized soul, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who follows in the footsteps of his great father, Srila Vyasadeva, the compiler of all Vedic literature. In the creation of the Lord, there are many wonderful things we can see with our own eyes every day and night, but we are unable to reach them, equipped by modern materialistic science. We should not therefore depend on the fragmentary authority of materialistic science for knowing things beyond the range of scientific purview. For a common man, both modern science and Vedic wisdom are simply to be accepted because none of the statements either of modern science or of Vedic literature can be verified by him. The alternative for a common man is to believe either of them or both of them. The Vedic way of understanding, however, is more authentic because it has been accepted by the acharyas, who are not only faithful and learned men, but are also liberated souls without any of the flaws of conditioned souls. The modern scientists, however, are conditioned souls liable to so many errors and mistakes. Therefore, the safe side is to accept the authentic version of Vedic literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, which is accepted unanimously by the great acharyas. '27. न यत्र शोको न जरा न मृत्यु नार्तिर्नो न चोद्वेग ऋते कुतश्चित् यच्चित् ततोदः कृपया निदं विदाम दुरंत दुःख प्रभवानुदर्शनात्. In the planet of Satyaloka, there is neither bereavement, nor old age, nor death. There is no pain of any kind, and therefore there are no anxieties, save that sometimes due to consciousness, there is a feeling of compassion for those unaware of the process of devotion service, who are subjected to unsurpassable miseries in the material world. Very good translation. तदेवाह न यत्रेति आर्त दुःखम उद्वेगः भयम्. So there is no distress, there is no fear also. किंतु चित् ततो हेतु दुःखम अधः ऋते तदेकं विना. So they are only out of compassion they are disturbed. ब्रह्मलोकम गतानां त्रिविधा गतिः. There are three ways or those uh, there are three ways by which people end up in Brahmaloka. ये पुण्योत्कर्षेण गताः ये कल्पान्तरे पुण्यतारतम्येन आधिकारिकाः भवन्ति. So those who end up in Brahmaloka are of three types. Those who through exalted punya have gone there at the end of a kalpa, but according to the gradation of their piety, they become officers. ये तु हिरण्य गर्भाद्युपासना बलेन गतास् ते ब्रह्मणा सह मुच्यन्ते. Those who go there by the strength of the worship of Hiranyagarbha, Virat meditation. Also, this can refer to the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. They are liberated along with Lord Brahma. Ye tu Bhagavat upasakas Te swechaya brahmandam bhitva vaishnavam padam aruhanti. But those who are worshippers of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by their own desire, they pierce through the Brahmanda coverings and they elevate themselves to the abode of Lord Vishnu. Not Saptalokasya, Satyalokasya. Satyalokasya Mahatmya Maha, which is the glory of Satyaloka, that is spelled out in this verse. Imam Vaishnavam Yogam Ajanatam Trilokastha Jananam. They have compassion for the residents of the three worlds. Three worlds are Bhurvasva, up to Swargaloka. Those who do not know this method of Vaishnava Yoga. तेन व्याजस्तुत्या सत्यलोकस्तास्ते महाकृपालवः धन्या एवेति भावः. The implication is that those who are residents of Satyaloka, they are exceptional, they are very greatly compassionate, they're very fortunate. Just give me 1 minute. Oh. Something about my health. That's all. Foolish men of materialistic temperament do not take advantage of successive authorized knowledge. The Vedic knowledge is authorized and is acquired not by experiment, but by authentic statements of the Vedic literatures explained by bona fide authorities. Simply by becoming an academic scholar, one cannot understand the Vedic statements. One has to approach the real authority who has received the Vedic knowledge by disciplic succession, as clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita 4.2. Lord Krishna affirmed that the system of knowledge, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, was explained to the sun god, and the knowledge descended by disciplic succession from the sun god to his son Manu, and from Manu to King Ikshvaku, the forefather of Lord Ramachandra. And thus the system of knowledge was explained down the line of great sages, one after another. But in due course of time, the authorized succession was broken, and therefore, just to re-establish the true spirit of the knowledge, the Lord again explained the same knowledge to Arjuna, who was a bona fide candidate for understanding due to his being a pure devotee of the Lord. How Arjuna understood the Bhagavad Gita is also explained 10.12 to 13. But there are many foolish men who do not follow in the footsteps of Arjuna in understanding the spirit of Bhagavad Gita. They create instead their own interpretations, which are as foolish as they themselves, and thereby only help to put a stumbling block on the path of real understanding, misdirecting the innocent followers who are less intelligent or the Shudras. It is said that one must become a Brahmana before one can understand the Vedic statements. And this stricture is as important as the stricture that no one shall become a lawyer who has not qualified himself as a graduate. Such a stricture is not an impediment in the path of progress for anyone and everyone, but it is necessary to prevent the unqualified from spreading their misunderstanding of a particular science. Vedic knowledge is misinterpreted by those who are not qualified Brahmanas. A qualified Brahmana is one who has undergone strict training under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. The Vedic wisdom guides us to understanding our relation with the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna and to acting accordingly in order to achieve the desired result of returning home back to Godhead. But materialistic men do not understand this. They want to make a plan to become happy in a place where there is no happiness. For false happiness, they try to reach other planets either by Vedic rituals or by spacecraft, but they should know for certain that any amount of materialistic adjustment for becoming happy in a place which is meant for distress cannot benefit the misguided man, because after all, the whole universe with all its paraphernalia will come to an end after a certain period. Then all plans of materialistic happiness will automatically come to an end. The intelligent person, therefore, makes a plan to return home back to Godhead. Such an intelligent person surpasses all the pangs of material existence like birth, death, disease, and old age. He is actually happy because he has no anxieties of material existence, but as a compassionate sympathizer, he feels unhappiness for the suffering materialistic man, and thus he occasionally comes before the materialistic man to teach them the necessity of going back to Godhead. All the bona fide acharyas preach this truth of returning home back to Godhead and warn men not to make a false plan for happiness in a place where happiness is only a myth. 28. ततो विशेषं प्रतिपद्य निर्भयस्तेनात्मना पूर्णलमूर्तिरत्परन् ज्योतिर्मयो वायुम् उपेत्य काले वायुवात्मनाखं बृहदात्मलिङ्गम्. After reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body. And one after another, he gradually attains stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, and airy until he reaches the ethereal state. Madhvacharya quotes from Brahmatarka to prove that the realized souls, after pralaya or dissolution, along with Brahma, they attain the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is situated in earth. And then they attain the Lord in water. And then they attain the Lord in fire, and so on. Into what, water, fire, air, akasha or ether, mind, and at each place they take, they are accompanied by that. Mind, intelligence, ahankara, something called vijnana, then mahatattva. Then they come to Lord Janardana, who is situated in Avyakta, the unmanifest portion of the material world. That Lord Janardana is called Ananda. Those who attain that Lord, they don't come back. तत्र प्रस्तुतस्य भगवद्भक्तस्य ब्रह्मांड भेदन प्रकारमाः. So the topic of discussion is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or he's moving up. So in this, from this verse, there's a description of the method of how he pierces through the coverings of the Brahmanda. Tatriyam prakriya. This is the process. Ishvara adhishtithayah prakrute kenachid amshena mahattattvam bhavati. When Prakriti, who is predominated by the Lord, has a part of her become the Mahatattva. Tasya amshena ahankara. And a portion of it becomes ahankara, false ego. Tasya amshena shabda tanmatra dwara nabha. A portion of that becomes akasha through the tanmatra known as sound. Tasya amshena sparsha tanmatra dwara vayu. And a portion of that becomes air through the tanmatra known as touch. Tanmatra means a subtle sense object. Tasyamshena rupa tanmatra dwara tejaha. A portion of that becomes tejas, or radiant energy, fire, through the tanmatra known as form. Tasyamshena rasa tanmatra dwara apaha. And a portion of that becomes water through the tanmatra known as taste. Tadamshena gantha tanmatra dwara prithvi. And a portion of that becomes earth or solids through the tanmatra known as fragrance. Taishya militaihi chaturvasha bhuvanatmakam virat shariram. The entire universal form, universal body, which comprises the 14 planetary systems, is just all of these mixed together, all of these combined together. तस्य च 50 कोटि योजन विशालस्य पृथ्वी एव अंडकटाह विशेष शब्दवाच्या कोटि योजन विशालम प्रथमा. This is all getting too much. It's all calculations are now beginning. So you have this Prithvi, the earth, which is 50 crore yojanas wide. And the first covering of the Brahmanda extends up to 1 koti yojana. Panchashat koti yojana vishalam ityeke. And some say that it extends up to 50 crores. Tatascha ab adinam ye parinata amshas tanyeva uttarottaram rashigунani avaranani. So the portions of water and so on, which are transformed, they themselves are the coverings, which are 10 times greater and greater and greater. Ashtamam tu prakriti-avaranam vyapakam eva. And the eighth covering, known as Prakriti, the covering of Prakriti, that is all pervasive in material existence. Tadevam sthite prithivya avarana bheda prakarah kathyate. So, this being the situation, there's a description of how one pierces through the coverings, beginning with Prithvi, earth. Vishesham pratipadya lingadehena prithvyatmatam prapya. So when one goes through, when one goes through after Brahmaloka, when one passes through with his subtle body, then he attains the nature of earth. Evam uttaratrapi drashtavyam. This should be considered as he passes through each other phase. He attains the nature of the other covering. Nirbhayaha atham yasyami iti shankashunya. We should not have the fear how I will pass through. Tenatmana prithvirupena tad nirantara apah pratipadya atvaram tvarama kurvan. Without being in a state of hurry, he should move further. Tattad atmatvena kleda deha adi shankha abhava. Without being frightened that he'll get wet, whether he'll get burnt and so on. Yateshtam bhogam bhunjana, as experiencing various delights. Evam jyotirmaya sun, in this way, in a shining state, he moves through at the right time. Bhoga avasani. And at the end of his enjoyment of various delights, he then goes further and further and further. Atartikayam eka brahmanda pakshe eva. This is sangamitaha. Bahu brahmanda pakshistu evam. Sangamitaha. This is. Let me open Kramasandarbha. Where is Kramasandarbha? In Sanskrit. Solid text. What is this? 2.2.28. Okay, 2.28, I got it. Sangamita. The commentary of Peter Swami deals with the situation when that living entity is passing through a single Brahmanda. Bahu Brahmanda Pakshastu evam. Brahmandani khalu ekatraiva an uccha nichattvena mandalibhuya vartante. The Brahmandas are all presented together. Tesham prithviavaranam pratyekam prithageva. The coverings of each Brahmanda, beginning with earth, are separate. The coverings of each Brahmandas, the earthly covering of each Brahmanda is separate. Jalavarnam tu tanmandalat bahihi purvavarnat dashagunam ekameva. Whereas the water covering is one for all the Brahmandas, which is outside of the earth, earthly covering. That is 10 times larger than the previous avarana, previous covering. Yasyopari cha sarva brahmanda karanam shayi eka 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 eva shape. There's only one karanam shayi who is above all of this. He is the cause of all the brahmandas. Yattu mandala abhyantare api yat kinchit jalam pravishati tattu avana sanjam na bhavati anishchayamanatva. Some amount of water enters uh, into the mandala, but that is not considered to be an avarana because it does not have a fixed measurement. तदेवम् एव अहंकार आदि आवरणानां सर्वभूत आवरकत्वं संगच्छेत इति. This is how it would be appropriate to talk about ahankara and the other coverings being the covering of all the elements. विशेषं प्रतिपद्य प्राचीन स्थूलदेह इव तत्र लिंगदेह आवेशं कृत्वा. Previously, the soul had a gross body. So when he passes through the element, the covering of earth, then that subtle body gets an avesha, gets is overcome by the nature of that particular element. पुनश्च तेन विशेष आविष्टेन लिंगदेह अख्येन एव आत्मना अपः जल आवरणं प्रतिपद्य प्राचीन स्थूलदेहत एव विशेषतः उत्क्रमपूर्वकम्. So in that way, then he goes to water and attains the nature of that subtle body gets the nature of water. So then he attains the nature of fire. He attains the form of a fire. इत्यादि योज्यम्. This should be understood. तत्र तत्र लोकविशेषेषु भोगश्चेत् लीलाशरीरोऽपि मन्तव्यम्. And if in those worlds there are opportunities for enjoyment, then it should be accepted that such a soul accepts sportive bodies. He accepts bodies just for sport. This is called the Leela Sharira. Just in order to experience various delights. So he has the ability to expand. अथ तत्रैव यदि महाकल्पपर्यन्तं स्थातुमिच्छति तथा ब्रह्मणा सह एव मुच्यते. यदि च तदन्तरेव मोक्षमिच्छति तथा सप्तावरणानि निर्भिद्यैव ब्रह्म प्रविशति इति तत्प्रकारमाह. If he desires to stay in Brahmaloka until the end of Mahakalpa. Mahakalpa is Brahma's life. Then he is liberated along with Brahma. And if in the middle of, he immediately wants to, in the middle of Brahma's life, not at the end of Brahma's life, he desires liberation, then he pierces through the seven coverings and he enters into the impersonal Brahman. Tatvaran. He goes through um, without without being in a hurry. He passes through this covering without being in a hurry. Why without being in a hurry? Tatra tatra prithvi janadishu घ्राण रसनादि इंद्रियैः गंध रसादीन विचित्र भोग विषयान भोक्तुमेव. Because in each of these places, each of these, not janadishu, jala, it goes through the covering of earth, water, and so on. It gives him an opportunity to enjoy the various objects of enjoyment, the variegated objects of enjoyment in these coverings. Those who want more details should go through the second part of Brihad Bhagavatamrita. They'll get all this information. Tato Jyotirmaya Kale Vayu Atmana Vayum Tejo Rashagunam Upetyakham Vayum. So each covering is 10 times larger than the other. Brihadatmalingam, that indicates that when it comes to Akasha, then is worshipping the Supreme Lord's form. Or else he is engaged in worship in line with Veda Shabda, Vedic sound, through a form which can only be understood through the Vedas. We are in absolute ignorance of all this. Right, there's some questions here in the chat box. These persons who are reaching higher planets, are they becoming self-realized? There are different levels of self-realization. So devotee means pure devotee. Then why Prabhupada is using it here? Devotee in general means a pure devotee. When there is a discussion of pure devotional service, Bhagavatam promotes pure devotional service, and the others are being contrasted. We also penetrate these layers through chanting. I heard how that happens. That is all pure chanting. When we execute pure chanting, and that will happen. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, is there any specific reason that this each subsequent layer is 10 times the previous layer?
I do not know. I'm not happy about it. It's too complicated. Okay, continue. Anyone who can reach Brahmaloka or Satyaloka by dint of spiritual perfection and practice is qualified to attain three different types of perfection. One was attained a specific planet by dint of pious activities, attains places in terms of his comparative pious activities. One who has attained the place by dint of Virat or Hiranyagarbha worship is liberated along with the liberation of Brahma. But one who attains uh, the place by dint of devotion service is specifically mentioned here in relation to how he can penetrate into the different coverings of the universe and thus ultimately disclose his spiritual identity in the absolute atmosphere of supreme existence. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, all the universes are clustered together up and down, and each and every one of them is separately sevenfold covered. The watery portion is beyond the sevenfold coverings, and each covering is 10 times more expansive than the previous covering. The personality of Godhead who creates all such universes by his breathing period lies above the cluster of the universes. The water of the causal ocean is differently situated than the covering water of the universe. The water that serves as covering for the universe is material, whereas the water of the causal ocean is spiritual. As such, the watery covering mentioned here is considered to be the false egoistic covering of all living entities. And the gradual process of liberation from the material coverings, one after another, as mentioned here, and it's the gradual process of being liberated from false egoistic conceptions of the material gross body, and then being absorbed in the identification of the subtle body till the attainment of the pure spiritual body in the absolute realm of the kingdom of God. Srila Sridhar Swami confirms that part of the material nature, after being initiated by the Lord, is known as the Mahatattva. A fractional portion of the Mahatattva is called the false ego. A portion of the ego is a vibration of sound, and a portion of sound is atmospheric air. A portion of the airy atmosphere is turned into forms, and the forms constitute the power of electricity or heat. Heat produces the smell of the aroma of the earth, and the gross earth is produced by such aroma. And all these combined together constitute the cosmic phenomenon. The extent of the cosmic phenomenon is calculated to be diametrically both ways 4 billion miles. Then the coverings of the universe begin. The first stratum of the covering is calculated to extend 40 billion miles, and the subsequent coverings of the universe are respectively of fire, effulgence, air, and ether, one after another, each extending 10 times further than the previous. The fearless devotee of the Lord penetrates each one of them and ultimately reaches the absolute atmosphere where everything is of one and the same spiritual identity. Then the devotee enters one of the Vaikuntha planets where he assumes exactly the same form as the Lord and engages in the loving transcendental service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of devotional life. Beyond this, there is nothing to be desired or achieved by the perfect yogi. 29. घ्राणेन गंधम रसनेन वैरसम रूपम च दृष्ट्या श्वसनम पचैव श्रोत्रेण चोपेत्य नभो गुणत्वं प्राणेन चाकूर्तिमुपैति योगी. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. Indrayarthanam bhuta sukshmanam atikramamaha. Now he's talking about how one crosses over all the gross and subtle entities. This refers to the sense objects. Anena akasha avarnad bahireva sukshma rupani avarnani labhyante. From this, it is understood that beyond the covering of akasha, ether, there are subtle coverings. Yuktam Chaidam, and this is appropriate. Karana Karananam Bahir Bahir Avasthana Prapte, because the causes are presented outside. Yavahitanam api Karananam Amsham Amsham Upadaya Ishwarena Tattat Karya Srishte, because the Supreme Lord uses portions to create. Create means that is actually an effect that is created. Yatha Gandha Dhanmānamukhi. किन्तु गन्धतन्मात्रादीनां सूक्ष्मत्वेन अनुपलभ्यमानत्वात् आकाशतुल्यत्वम् इति आकाशान्तर्गणनात् अष्टवेव आवर्णानि अवसीयन्ते. In the ultimate analysis, it is said to have that there are said to be only 8 coverings because the tanmatras or the subtle sense objects of fragrance and so on, because they are subtle, they cannot be grossly experienced. They are as good as the covering of ether. तत्र घ्राणेन इति घ्राणद्वारा गन्धम् आविश्य इति अर्थः. So just as one went through the um, different gross elemental coverings and he was overcome by the nature of those, now when he passes through these subtle coverings, then he is also overcome by the nature of these subtle coverings. Beyond the sky, there are subtle coverings resembling the elementary coverings of the universes. The gross coverings are a development of partial ingredients of the subtle causes. So the yogi or devotee, along with the liquidation of the gross elements, relinquishes the subtle causes like aroma by smelling. The pure spiritual spark, the living entity, thus becomes completely cleansed of all material contamination to become eligible for entrance into the kingdom of God. It's 30. Some question here. There is translation application available for commentaries. Can't be used in which says or time more. No. You read through a complete translation of all this, you'll go mad. There are translations already available. You read through them and go mad. Far better to examine and just take out the gist of it. Actually, Gopi Pranadhu, my teacher also said that's how we should teach. When we present the previous Acharya's explanation to the students, we should not simply just translate it, he said. We carefully examine, and only the portion that helps us better understand the purpose, only those portions we should present. Other things you'll understand much later on. If you want to understand everything of Jiva Goswami that he wrote in Krama Sandarbha, you'll have to read all of Jiva Goswami's writings to properly understand. So if you want to understand Vishnu Chakravarti's Sarartha Darshini, you have to read all of Vishnu Chakravarti's writings. So all of that happens much later on. And nor is it possible within a limited period of time to explain all of that. So since our pratika, our primary focus of study is Prabhupada's presentation of Bhagavatam, naturally, we only accept the gist or elements from the commentaries. 30. Sabhuta Sukshmendriya Sannikarsham Manomayam Devamayam Vikarim Samsadhya Gatya Sahatena Yati Vijnana Tattvam Gunasannirodham. The devotee, thus surpassing the gross and subtle forms of coverings, enters the plane of egoism. And in that status, he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance and passion, into this point of neutralization and thus reaches egoism and goodness. After this, all egoism is merged into the Mahatattva and he comes to the point of pure self-realization. तदेवं स्थूल सूक्ष्म भूत अतिक्रमं त्वा तदावरणभूत अहंकार प्राप्त्या महदादि प्राप्तिमाह. So having stated how one crosses beyond the gross and subtle elements, he now says that one attains Mahatattva and so on by attaining the covering of all of these gross and subtle elements, which is ahankara. he comes to the point of ahankara, which is of three types: tamasa, rajasa, and satvika. Tatra tamasa jadani bhuta sukshmani jayante. From the ignorant portion of ahankara, matter in the form of the gross elements and subtle elements arise. Rajasad bahirmukhani dashendriyani. Satvika mana indriya devatascha. From the rajasa ahankara, we get these 10 senses. From satvika ahankara, we get the presiding deities of the senses and mind. Tesham layascha tattad ahankare. And the dissolution of each of this happens in those respective forms of ahankara. So when one crosses beyond, then each of these are given back to their respective sources. Vijnana Tattva is Mahatattva. And the three modes, they are all dissolved into that. After that, in Pradhan. This Ahankara refers to the remaining portion of Ahankara. The Mahatattva is merged into Pradhana. Pure self-realization, as we have several times discussed, is the pure consciousness of admitting oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Lord. Thus, one is reinstated in his original position of transcendental loving service to the Lord, as will be clearly explained in the following verse. The stage of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord without any hopes of emolument, that means any remuneration from the Lord, or any other way, can be attained when the material senses are purified and the original pure state of the senses is revived. It is suggested herein that the process of purifying the senses is by the yogic way, namely the gross senses are merged into the mode of ignorance, and the subtle senses are merged into the mode of passion. The mind belongs to the mode of goodness and therefore is called Devamaya or godly. Perfect purification of the mind is made possible when one is fixed in the conviction of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. Therefore, simple attainment of goodness is also a material mode. One has to surpass this stage of material goodness and reach the point of purified goodness or Vasudeva Sattva. This Vasudeva Sattva helps one to enter into the kingdom of God. We may also remember in this connection that the process of gradual emancipation by the devotees in the manner mentioned above, although authoritative, is not viable in the present age because of people's being primarily unaware of yoga practice. The so-called yoga practice by the professional protagonists may be physiologically beneficial, but such small successes cannot help one in the attainment of spiritual emancipation as mentioned herein. 5,000 years ago, when the social status of human society was in perfect Vedic order, the yoga process mentioned herein was a common affair for everyone, because everyone, and especially the Brahmana and Kshatriya, was trained in the transcendental art under the care of the spiritual master, far away from home, in the status of brahmacharya. Modern man, however, is incompetent to understand it perfectly. Lord Chaitanya, therefore, made it easier for the prospective devotee of the present age in the following specific manner. Ultimately, there is no difference in the result. The first and foremost point is that one must understand the prime importance of Bhakti Yoga. The living beings in different species of life are undergoing different terms of engagement, imprisoned in a cage, according to their fruitive actions and reactions. But in the execution of different activities, one who secures some resources in Bhakti Yoga can, Bhakti Sukriti, can understand the importance of service to the Lord through the causeless mercy of the Lord, as well as that of the spiritual master. A sincere soul is helped by the Lord through meeting a bona fide spiritual master, the representative of the Lord. By the instruction of such a spiritual master, one gets the seed of Bhakti Yoga. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that the devotee sow the seed of Bhakti Yoga in his heart and nurture it by the watering of hearing and chanting the holy name, fame, etc. of the Lord. The simple process of offenselessly chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord will promote one very soon to the stage of emancipation. There are three stages in chanting the holy name of the Lord. The first stage is the offensive chanting of the holy name, and the second is the reflective stage of chanting the holy name. The third stage is the offenseless chanting of the holy name. Offensive chanting, reflective chanting, offenseless chanting. In the second stage, only the stage of reflection, between the offensive and offenseless stages, one automatically attains the stage of emancipation or liberation. And in the offenseless stage, one actually enters into the kingdom of God, although physically he may apparently be within the material world. To attain the offenseless stage, we must be on guard in the following manner. When we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one chant and hear the holy name of the Lord as Rama, Krishna, or systematically as the 16 names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. So the reason why study of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and other Shuddha Bhakti Granthas are provided is to help us engage in uh, offenseless chanting, or at least impel us to chant without offenses. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati always stressed it. This primary practice of Bhakti Yoga will cause the seed already sown in the heart to sprout. And by a regular watering process, as mentioned above, the Bhakti Yoga creeper will begin to grow. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the coverings of the universe, as we have heard in the previous verses, reach the effulgent sky, the Brahmajyoti, and go farther and farther and reach the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. Above all of them is Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavan, wherein the growing creeper enters and takes repose at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. When one reaches the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan, the watering process of hearing and reading, as also chanting of the holy name in the pure devotional stage, fructifies, and the fruits grown there in the form of love of God are tangibly tasted by the devotee, even though he is here in this material world. The ripe fruits of love of God are relished only by the devotees constantly engaged in the watering process as described above. But the working devotee must always be mindful so that the creeper which has so grown will not be cut off. Therefore, he should be mindful of the following considerations. Offense by one at the feet of a pure devotee may be likened to the mad elephant who devastates a very good garden if it enters. One must be very careful to guard himself against such offenses at the feet of pure devotees, just as one protects the creeper by all around fencing. It so happens that by the watering process, some weeds are also grown. And unless such weeds are uprooted, the nurturing of the main creeper or the creeper of Bhakti Yoga may be hampered. Actually, these weeds are material enjoyment, merging of the self in the absolute without separate individuality, and many other desires in the field of religion, economic development, sense enjoyment, and emancipation. There are many other weeds like disobedience to the tenets of the revered scriptures, unnecessary engagements, killing animals, and hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. If sufficient care is not taken, then the watering process may only help to breed the weeds, stunting the healthy growth of the main creeper and resulting in no fructification of the ultimate requirement, love of God. The devotee must therefore be very careful to uproot the different weeds in the very beginning. Only then will the healthy growth of the main creeper not be stunted. And by so doing, the devotee is able to relish the fruit of love of God and thus live practically with Lord Krishna even in this life and be able to see the Lord in every step. The highest perfection of life is to enjoy life constantly in the association of the Lord. And one who can relish this does not aspire after any temporary enjoyment of the material world via other media. Text 31. Tenatmanatmanam upaiti shantam anandam anandam mayovasane etam gatim bhagavatim gato yah savai punarneha vishajyatenga. Only the purified soul can attain the perfection of associating with the personality of Godhead in complete bliss and satisfaction in his constitutional state. Whoever is able to renovate such devotional perfection is never again attracted by this material world, and he never returns. तेन आत्मा प्रधान रूपेण आनंदमय सन उपाधीनाम अवसाने शांतम अविकृतम आनंदम परमात्मानम उपैति. So when he has attained, when his subtle body has gone through all of these and then it is going through pradhana, then it is overcome by the nature of pradhana. Then he becomes filled with bliss, and when all the upadhis or material designations are destroyed, then he attains the supreme soul, Lord Vishnu, who is fully blissful, who is untransformed, who is very, very peaceful. Then he's no more attached to matter, which means he does not return. From that point, he is not forced to return. Atmana shuddhena swarupena tena pradhanam aveshitena punastatah utkramitena. So after he passes through pradhana, atmanam, paramatmanam, parama vaikunthana atamityartha. So this supreme soul refers to the supreme lord of Vaikuntha. Bhagavatim gatim ityukte, because here etam gatim bhagavatim, this expression is used. Bhagavatim indicates that he has attained the goal of Bhagavan. Tato vishesham ityatra tika avatarikayam ye tu bhagavad-upasakaste swekshaya brahmandam hitva vaishnavam padam arohanti. And this was also noted in the introductory remark of the commentary earlier on, or text 28, that however, those who are worshippers of Bhagavan, by their own wish, they penetrate through Brahmanda and climb up, elevate themselves to the abode of Lord Vishnu. Tasmat, Tanmatepi. So, even in the opinion of the commentator, Prakriti Avaranat Bahir Mahavaikuntha Loka, the great abode of Vaikuntha, is situated beyond Prakriti, beyond the covering of Prakriti. So when it says that the covering of Prakriti is all pervading, it means it's all pervading within a restricted area. Tatastena pradhanena saha atmana swaswarupena. So now he's in his own form. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says that one attains Sayujya in the Mahapurusha, Karnadamshayi. Of course, if a person is hankering for that, that is how you would attain. We should especially note in this verse, right? Something in the chat box. Can you share some examples who achieve like this? Share some examples who achieve. We will go open the Puranas and see. Even in Bhagavatam, there are. Gopi Prabhu once mentioned, he did a count in Bhagavatam, comes to some 32 or 33 persons who actually attained perfection in Bhagavatam, at least that much. What is tasting the fruit they experience by living in this material world? What is this tasting the fruit they experience? Who's tasting? What experience? What is this? I heard only after entering, giving up body. What does that mean? I heard only after entering, giving up body. Look, you write to me, you communicate in full sentences. I do not communicate in sutras. I communicate in vakyas. Vakya means there has to be a verb, there has to be noun or pronoun, there has to be subject, there has to be predicate. It can be active voice or passive voice, but it has to be proper communication. Let me try to decipher this. What is tasting the fruit? First of all, it is not what is tasting the fruit. What is meant by tasting the fruit? That day, I'm sure you are talking about Prabhupada's long purport, in which he is summarizing the Lord's teachings to Rupa Goswami. That fruit is love of God. They experience the bliss of love of God, even though they externally appear to be here. The experience of love of God is a state of samadhi. That is the point. I heard only after entering, giving up. This is all something. I don't even understand this question. What is this after? And what is only after entering and giving? How can you both enter into and give up the body? One will experience bliss. If you were to say only after one gives up the body, one will experience bliss, that is, gives up the gross body, gives up the subtle body. And on the other side, basically, we have to get out of the entire realm of material existence. That is correct. Why devotees do not share about these things who have achieved perfection? Devotees do not share about it. Why? Shukadeva Goswami himself has achieved perfection. That is why he is sharing all these things. The whole Bhagavatam is simply his realization about all these things. It's the same process now. What is there? Oh, they're not going to say different things. They're going to say there's no tips and tricks to. There's no cheating method. It's the same method. That's all. Yeah, it starts with Vacho Vegam, Manasa Prodha Vegam. It's the same method. We follow the same thing. We progress. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, before my question, just on Somapati Prabhu's last question, maybe he is asking that why from existing devotees, living devotees around us, we hear from them why we cannot, why they don't speak if they have achieved perfection.
If they have achieved, then they naturally speak. If they have achieved, then they naturally speak. What is there in this?
They speak that they have achieved perfection.
Yeah, those who have achieved, they will naturally speak to those who are eligible to achieve such perfection.
Okay, those are
Naturally, of course, and what? Of course.
So if we have not heard, either we are not surrounded by such devotees or we are ourselves are not eligible to hear.
Both it may be.
And Prabhu, my
Okay.
question was,
Hmm.
you were saying something else? My
Yes.
question, my question was, Prabhu, how one waters the weed? Like I am doing chanting and how it is watering my weeds.
See, we are chanting now. So the chanting itself generates pious credits. And from dharma, you get artha and kama. So you get a wonderful opportunity for artha kama. And we can easily get sidetracked by that. That's all.
Means I have material desires and if I chant, then those desires will be fulfilled. This is what watering the weed. Like that.
We have material desires or we have propensities for material desires. Those propensities for material desires will become material desires. Initially, generic material desires and then specific material desires.
So how I'll uproot them? I don't know how to uproot them.
How you will approach? You have to beg, cry, fall at Krishna's feet and nag, do everything, beg, borrow, steal until you get it. Therefore, there are so many prayer literature in the Gaudiya Vaishnava uh, body of writings. That is why we chant also. We are supposed to increase our chanting and we're supposed to increase our chanting and we engage in chanting in a prayerful spirit. Okay, let's move on. We should especially note in this verse the description of Gatim Bhagavatim, devotional destination. Gatim Bhagavatim. To become merged in the rays of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as desired by the Brahmavadi impersonalists, is not Bhagavati imperfection. The Bhagavatas never accept merging in the impersonal rays of the Lord, but always aspire after personal association with the Supreme Lord in one of the Vaikuntha spiritual planets in the spiritual sky. The whole of the spiritual sky, of which the total number of the material skies is only an insignificant part, is full of unlimited numbers of Vaikuntha planets. The destination of the devotee, the Bhagavata, is to enter into one of the Vaikuntha planets, in each of which the personality of Godhead, in his unlimited personal expansions, enjoys himself in the association of unlimited numbers of pure devotee associates. The conditioned souls in the material world, after gaining emancipation by devotional service, are promoted to these planets. But the number of ever liberated souls is far, far greater than the number of conditioned souls in the material world, and the ever liberated souls in the Vaikuntha planets never care to visit this miserable material world. The impersonalists who aspire to merge in the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence of the Supreme Lord, but have no conception of loving devotion service to Him in His personal form, in the spiritual manifestation, may be compared to certain species of fish who, being born in the rivers and rivulets, migrate to the great ocean. They cannot stay in the ocean indefinitely, for their urge for sense gratification brings them back to the rivers and streams to spawn. Similarly, when the materialist becomes frustrated in his attempts to enjoy himself in the limited material world, he may seek impersonal liberation by merging together with the causal ocean or with the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence. However, as neither the causal ocean nor the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence affords any superior substitute for association and engagement of the senses, the impersonalist will fall again into the limited material world to become entangled once more in the wheel of births and deaths, drawn on by the inextinguishable desire for sensual enjoyment, sensual engagement. But any devotee who enters the kingdom of God by transcendental engagement of his senses in devotion service and who associates with the liberated souls and the personality of Godhead there will never be attracted to the limited surroundings of the material world. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.15 also, the same is confirmed, as the Lord says, the great Mahatmas or the Bhakti yogis, after attaining my association, never come back to this material world which is full of miseries and is non-permanent. The highest perfection of life, therefore, is to attain his association and nothing else. The Bhakti yogi, being completely engaged in the Lord's service, has no attraction for any other process of liberation like jnana or yoga. A pure devotee is a 100% devotee of the Lord and nothing more. We should further note in this verse the two words Shantam and Anandam, which denote that devotional service of the Lord can really bestow upon the devotee two important benedictions, namely peace and satisfaction. The impersonalist is desirous of becoming one with the Supreme, or in other words, he wants to become the Supreme. This is a myth only. The mystic yogis are encumbered by various mystic powers and so have neither peace nor satisfaction. So neither the impersonalist nor the yogi can have a real peace and satisfaction, but the devotee can become fully peaceful and satisfied because of his association with the complete whole. Prabhupada has in mind that statement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashanta, Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ataev Shanta. This specifically refers to devotees of the Lord who do not desire sinful material enjoyment, sinless material enjoyment, impersonal liberation, or personal liberation. So neither the impersonalist nor the yogi can have real peace and satisfaction, but the devotee can become fully peaceful and satisfied because of his association with the complete whole. Therefore, merging in the absolute or attaining some mystic powers has no attraction for the devotee. Attainment of love of Godhead means complete freedom from all other attractions. The conditioned soul has many aspirations, such as becoming a religious man, becoming a rich man, or first-class enjoyer, becoming God himself, or becoming powerful like the mystics and acting wonderfully by getting anything or doing anything. But all these aspirations should be rejected by the prospective devotee who actually wants to revive his dormant love of God. The impure devotee aspires after all of the above-mentioned material things by perfection of devotion, but the pure devotee has none of the tinges of the above contaminations, which are the influence of material desires, impersonal speculations, and attainment of mystic powers. One can attain the stage of love of God by pure devotional service or by a learned labor of love for the sake of the devotee's lovable object, the personality of God. To be more clear, if one wants to attain the stage of love of God, he must give up all desires for material enjoyment. He should refrain from worshipping any of the demigods, and he should devote himself only to the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You must give up the foolish idea of becoming one with the Lord and the desire to have some wonderful powers just to get the ephemeral means temporary, adoration of the world. The pure devotee is only favorably engaged in the service of the Lord without any hope of emolument. So he has no desire for any remuneration of any kind, any reciprocal reward. This will bring about love of God, Godhead, or the stage of Shantam and Anandam as stated in this verse. Okay, so I'll stop with this. All right. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Prabhu, I have two questions. Uh, Continuing the previous question of weeds. First is like when you said that there will be so many wonderful opportunities present, they may present in when one is engaged in bhakti. So can you please give some example for a person like me? What all wonderful allurements can come and how I may get sidetracked? Because I'm not, I want to clarify it even more. How it happens, what may happen.
You may fall into the trap of puja, love, pratishtha. You may develop the desire to enter into a dharmic life of sense enjoyment under the label of Krishna consciousness itself. Like that, so many things are there.
And the second was
See, when we
this
progress
chant.
in Krishna consciousness, if we have the desire to please Krishna uninterruptedly, and we only have the desire to please Krishna, and we pray to Krishna, and we please help me, then Krishna comes forward and makes one understand the process of Krishna consciousness. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. All the shiksha that we jivatmas are giving, including the shiksha by one spiritual master, all of that is meant to make one eligible to receive this Dadami buddhi yogam tam, this buddhi yoga from the Supreme Lord. So for that, we just need to be pure. So when we execute Anyavilashita Shunyam Jnanakarma Jnanavritam Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktiruttama, then we will experience these features of pure devotional service. Kleshagni, Shubhada, Moksha Laguta, Krit, Suturlabha, Sandrananda Visheshatma, Sri Krishna Karshini Chasa. One will, the goal of sadhana bhakti is bhava bhakti. So in bhava bhakti, there are nine features of bhava bhakti. You can look at that and see to what percentage of that you have in yourself now, and that should be increased until it becomes 100%. When it's 100%, you know that you have attained bhava bhakti. In the state of bhava bhakti, one will directly be able to see Krishna. One begins to see Krishna. Other ways of finding out how one is progressing or not is in Bhagavad Gita uh, we have a list of features of Sthita Pragya in second chapter. Then we have a list of features of the Gunatita in 14th chapter. And then we have a list of features of Bhagavad Bhakta in the 12th chapter. So one can keep checking to what extent one has attained these features, what percentage of these features have appeared in our life. So that's how we check whether we are progressing or regressing. Another way of finding out is you can check to what extent you are engaging in the 6 items that are favorable in Bhakti Yoga. This is Upadeshamrita X3, and the extent to which we are engaged in activities that are unfavorable in Bhakti Yoga. This is Upadeshamrita text 2. So in that way, there are ways to check whether one is progressing or regressing. Yet another way is there are 26 qualities of a devotee that are enlisted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One can check, against that. Prabhupada, in his writings, he has presented a number of ways to self-test whether one is progressing in Krishna consciousness, whether one is static in Krishna consciousness, or whether one is regressing in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so next question.
Prabhu, when you mentioned about chanting in a prayerful mood, can you explain it? Because I don't know what is this prayerful mood. Like I am chanting, so mentally I should be saying some other prayer because I used to do it, but later I thought this is not correct. So I don't know
There are
actually.
prayers to the holy name. There are other prayers also.
But while chanting,
Vandanam.
how I do that?
No, not while chanting. It's not just chanting. It is a life of chanting. The actual chanting may be just for a short, initially it may just be for a short while. But it is a complete life of chanting that Krishna observes. Chanting is a foreground activity. And the background is what do we do when we are not chanting? Everything. Krishna takes everything into consideration. So when we are not chanting, then that's why there are so many other items that are presented. 64 items of sadhana bhakti, no?
Yes, bro.
All right. We'll stop at that.
So engaging in that, those other items will make the proper mood for chanting, like that.
Yeah, everything is just to bring us to the point of becoming sevon mukha, becoming inclined to ahaituki apratihata adhokshaja bhakti. Once we are inclined to uninterrupted, unmotivated service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when we engage in Bhakti Yoga, instantly the effect will come.
Thank you, bro.
26 qualities explaining Mahaprabhu, which book is all such terrible, Which book explains the 26 qualities? Okay, the 26 qualities are in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'll tell you that. That is such an important, right? Prabhupada told one devotee, Rupanuga Prabhu, you have to write down these 26 qualities and regularly keep checking whether these are appearing in our life or not. It is itself coming from 11th canto. It's derived from 11th canto. This one. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 22, texts 78, 79, 80. Kripalu, Kritadoha, Satyasarasam, Dosha Vadanya Mridu, Shuchiya Kinchan, Sarvopakaraka Shanta Krishneka Sharan, Akama Anihastir, Vijita Shadgun, Mitavuk Apramatta Manada Omani, Gambhir Karuna Maitra Kavidaksham Mauni. Devotees are always merciful, humble, truthful, equal to all, faultless, magnanimous, mild, and clean. They are without material possessions. They perform welfare work for everyone. They are peaceful, surrendered to Krishna, and desireless. They are indifferent to material acquisitions and are fixed in devotion service. They completely control the 6 bad qualities, lust, anger, greed, and so on. They eat only as much as required and they are not inebriated. Apramatta. They are respectful, grave, compassionate, and without false prestige. They are friendly, poetic, expert, and silent. Now, out of all this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also clarified it is this Krishnaika Sharan which is the most important feature. Exclusively surrendered to Krishna.
So when we say surrender to Krishna, it should reflect those six limbs of surrender.
Yeah. Uh, सर्व महागुणगण वैष्णव शरीरे कृष्ण भक्ति कृष्ण निर्गुण सकलि संचारे. This is only an indication. But amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas, these 26 are considered very important. It's derived from 11th canto, Lord Krishna's description to Uddhava. This is just a Bengali paraphrase of the Sanskrit verses here. Not only Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave this theory, he also showed the world what it actually means. Therefore, he gave the six Goswamis, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and showed the world. See, this is what is called a pure devotee, perfect pure devotee. This is the ideal devotee. All of you should become like them, step by step. Of course, we cannot immediately. If we try to imitate, then we'll collapse. But that's the point. But there's something in the chat box. In 13th chapter, there are 26 qualities. Those are also belonging to this only. 13th chapter, which one? The features of jnana. The good features of a jnani automatically appear in a person who's executing bhakti yoga also. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also quotes the verses in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He quotes that. Okay. Okay, we'll stop with that. Anshakal Patra Shuru Pasan the Kriya Vacha Patanam Pavan Vishnu.